Welcome to today's episode. We're talking all things generative AI with our brilliant guest, entrepreneur Geoff Davies. Geoff, on the brink of launching his innovative new venture, Pivotal Edge AI, brings a unique perspective shaped by his data-driven lifestyle.
There is this fantastic technology called generative AI. Let's look at the business problems and then match up what could be solved and what we think could be solved by generative AI. So you can really very quickly get into delivering real business value.
This approach not only enhances his performance as an ultramarathon runner, but also enriches his private piloting pursuits. We tackle the sensitive topic of AI adoption and its perceived threat to job security, addressing the concerns and misconceptions surrounding this issue.
Over the next year or two, what we're going to see is a lot of augmentation. They'll be able to be more productive, they'll be able to get their jobs done much more efficiently.
This is not one to be missed. So Geoff, let's talk data. So I thought we'd start maybe at the beginning of your journey and how you got to the point you are today, where you're about to start your new business, Pivotal Edge AI.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Emma, thanks very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. So look, I've been in the technology business for a very, very long time, and been through all sorts of stuff over the years, working for some very big organisations. I've worked for some of the world's biggest banks, and also worked for a lot of sort of mid-sized companies and things as well.
Yeah.
And it's been a fantastic time working in technology. Most recently, I just recently exited a company which we were involved in cloud transformation. It's a company called AppScore. We built a cloud transformation tool, which is all about helping larger enterprises understand all the different systems that they had in use, all the different software applications, where all their data was spread across their organizations, because most people have no idea where any of that stuff is.
They don't.
So this really helped them get all that stuff together and then map out how they would take that across to cloud. So we built that up. We had a lot of great partners we worked with, lots of great customers we worked with as well. And then early 2023, we got acquired by SoftwareOne, and they took the company off us, which is great. So I did a short transition role with SoftwareOne, but all the time through that process, I was sort of looking at this new period of AI that's coming through. You know, AI itself, if you look at the whole sector, isn't that new. You know, it's been around for a very long time. Data science has been around for a very long time, of course, as well. You know, machine learning is a really well-established sector. But this whole area of generative AI, which we're now entering into that wave, is just phenomenal. And I think, you know, we've all looked at ChatGPT, we're seeing M365 Copilot and everything come through. And, you know, everybody's looking at that saying, this is fantastic. You know, and everybody I speak to, CIOs and CTOs that I know, you know, they're saying, well, I've played around with ChatGPT. I can see what it can do. I can see the potential of it. But how do I use it in my organization? And that sort of led me to where I am today, which is to say, there's a lot of organizations out there right now who will see the power of this technology, want to start using that in their organization. And that's what my new company, Pivotal Edge AI, is all about, is helping organizations, sort of mid-size, you know, 250 employees upwards, embrace AI, bring in that generative AI into their business and make the absolute best of it.
Sure. So you're about to do it all over again.
Absolutely.
Build a business again.
Love it.
And when did you decide then? When was the turning point for you? Like, did you always know you wanted to have another business after AppScore? Or was it a completely organic journey?
Yeah, it's an interesting question to ask. You know, I think you always learn things along the way, and you want to go and take those lessons and put them back into practice as well. You know, I do a lot of running. I'm an ultra runner, and every race that you complete, you always think about, what could I do next? How could I go faster? You know, you're always looking at, you know, I've chipped that bit off my marathon time. How much quicker can I go? And you're always looking ahead to things, and you take all those lessons you learn. And I find business is exactly the same. You know, so I really look at all the stuff I learned when we did AppScore. All of those things. You know, we went through and raised investment. You know, we sold the company. All of these things. Take all those experiences and see what's there. But I think when I started looking at AI and generative AI specifically, you know, having been in the IT business for a very long time, this is probably the most transformative technology I've ever seen.
Right.
You know, it is absolutely phenomenal what it's going to do. The pace at which it moves as well. You know, I think when ChatGPT first launched in sort of around November 2023 when it came out to the wider market. Obviously, OpenAI been working on it for some time up until then. But when it came out into the mainstream, people started using it. from that point in late 2022 rather through to now, it's incredible what's happened in those last sort of 15 months or so. Just how fast that's moved. And at the time we're recording this, GPT-5 is soon to appear, which should be another leap on as well, which is going to be super interesting to see what OpenAI have done with that. But I think how it transforms business. What that means for organizations, the kind of things they're going to be able to do, automating lots of types of tasks that we would do manually today. The art of the possible is just phenomenal. So I don't want to miss out.
No,
I want to be part of this. I want to see where it goes.
Good answer.
Yeah.
In terms of industry then, do you think there are some early adopters of AI that you recognise now in the market?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I don't think that anybody actually really knows. There's lots of ideas. The legal sector certainly looks like one that is ripe for disruption because of a number of characteristics in legal. They've got lots of repetitive tasks, and anything which is a repetitive task is a good candidate. There's no guarantees of anything with generative AI that's definitely going to solve problems, but we can look for good candidates. So that sort of thing. They do lots of research. And there's lots of reusable material and things as well. So the legal sector is sort of being looked at as one that's going to take have a lot of change in there. But anywhere where there's a lot of connectivity with humans and between humans is definitely going to be something where generative AI is going to play a big part. So for example, if you've got contact centers, I think these days, when did you last go into a bank branch? You do everything online, and increasingly, if you want to make changes rather than have to phone into the bank, you do it through an agent, and there's actually a physical person sat there in a contact center who's answering those queries. Increasingly, that's going to be where generative AI is going to be able to respond really well to those. I think we've all been probably very frustrated when you've gone through the agent experience where you're in a chatbot and there's somebody in a contact center, maybe locally in your country, maybe somewhere else in the world. And of course, as you know, with those, the agent in the contact center is running multiple chat sessions at one time.
Are they? I thought you were just talking to me.
No, that's why you get that big delay. You know how you send a message and you sit there and you wait? It's because that physical person, that agent, the person in the contact center is probably running 10 or 20 or more conversations and they're progressively working around them, which is why you get this big delayed response. Okay. And so that's ripe for innovation there as well. Where you've got lots of queries coming in, common queries coming in from customers, what's the status of my order? I would like a refund, all of these kind of things. If you think about what generative AI is going to do, you can then parse that email and that message that comes from the customer, take meaning from it, understand what is the customer's problem, what do they need help with, and what can we do for them, and then craft a response that can then go back. So wherever that is in those kind of customer service type, that's very big for generative AI. And also finding information across organizations. I've worked for some very, very large organizations. The place I just sold our previous organization, AppScore, to was a big global company with nearly 10,000 employees. Lovely company, great culture. But trying to find information, when I suddenly went from being a startup entrepreneur to selling the company to then being part of a big organization again, I'd forgotten how bad it was just to try and find things like, trying to find an HR policy, trying to find your travel expense policy or something like that. And you're going through all these different intranets and there's all these different websites and things you've got to try and find information on. I think increasingly in big organizations, what we'll see is we'll have some kind of chatbots, co-pilots, which is, I just want to know how do I submit my expenses? How do what's the HR process for this? I want to know, I've got I'm an ordinary user. I need to get access to an MI system or something I don't have access to. You go trawling around systems trying to find the answers. I just want to go into a chatbot and say, how do I get access to the analytics system?
I thought about that. That sounds like my laptop though, trying to find folders and files.
Exactly. Well, and that's a really good use case for it as well. It's just finding information. I know I did this. I know I wrote an email to Emma 6 months ago where I'm pretty sure I said this. And I can't find it.
It drives you mad.
Yeah, but imagine if you could have a natural language discussion with your laptop and say, look, I sent an email to Geoff 6 months ago. We talked about this, and I know I sent it, and it was around this subject. Can you help me find it?
Amazing.
And it will find it. And it'll be increasing those. And this, I think, is partly why generative AI is one of the biggest, most transformative changes I've ever seen in the technology business. Because, I think I heard Bill Gates talk about this actually recently. He was saying about, you remember when because he was there right at the beginning, when the mouse came out and graphical user interfaces, that was a huge leap forward of that human computer interface change. And the same thing is now going to happen with generative AI. The fact we will be able just to talk to the computer and it will literally be talking to it in the way that you might do with a Siri or something like that, or Alexa, to say, I sent this email, can you find it for me?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Could you create a spreadsheet for me on last month's sales figures, and I need to see this, this and this. This is what the boss has asked me to do. I need to bring these numbers together. And you'll have that kind of dialogue. And the computer will answer back to you and say, okay, great, I can do that for you. How far back in the data, which sectors which departments did you want to include in those sales figures, and so on. And you'll have that kind of discussion with it to get to it. So,
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So the art of the possible is just so exciting with generative AI.
And I guess for you, really, in this space operating is educating people on what is possible, essentially.
Yeah.
And through your services and solutions, is that what you're educating, your partners on? Or will be?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we do know from so far with AI, I mean, generative AI is so new. Nobody knows. Nobody has the answers to this. We've all got ideas about what might be possible. There's a few case studies and things of some exciting things people have done. But one thing we can draw on that we do know is from machine learning is that most or many AI projects don't deliver your expected outcome. So you've got to go into it thinking, okay, we think, this is our hypothesis, we think that, if I take a contact center, we receive 2,000, 20,000 emails a month from our customers. We think if we use generative AI there, we could cut the number of hours in half, for example.
Sure.
Yeah, that's your hypothesis going in. What you've got to do is say, okay, how can we quickly establish whether that's possible or not? We don't want to embark on a great big project, spend hundreds of thousands or millions on it to go and do that, and then finally get to the end and we didn't get the expected outcome.
Yeah.
So how do we start this up? How do we firstly clearly identify what the business use case is? What is the benefit to the business? It was a segue into that very slightly. That's probably the most important thing with generative AI is not looking at from a technology perspective, but looking from a business perspective and say, what is the business problem that we're going to be able to solve here? It could be we can help make our call center staff much more efficient. We can help them answer customer queries better. We're always struggling to hire new people into the contact center. Maybe actually we can offload a lot of that work onto generative AI, and then our core team of people we've got, we can really focus them on the much more difficult customer queries to deal with. So you really got to drill into what's the business case and lead from the business side of things. So that's very much what I'm looking to help customers with, is to understand this is you, this is your business. There is this fantastic technology called generative AI. Let's look at the business problems and then match up what could be solved and what we think could be solved by generative AI.
Sure.
And then very quickly establishing how do you run those pilot projects to then test out whether or not they're going to deliver the expected benefits. So you can really very quickly get into delivering real business value using these exciting new technologies that's in there. And part of that is about understanding, most organizations have got pretty extensive data sets that they've built up over the years. With those data sets, there's lots to look at, which is firstly, how applicable is that to use with generative AI? So if we take the contact center example, what's the data quality like in those systems? Because this could go off, and go badly very quickly if you've got poor quality data and you're trying to use that with those kind of systems. You've also got to look at how you can use that data, and actually there's some really good advice that the Information Commissioner has here in the UK, all about where and how you can use your data with AI algorithms. There are things under GDPR, for example, you cannot make fully automated decisions because of all the bias that might be in there and so on. There's got to be a human in the loop somewhere. So you've got to make sure that with your data, you're looking at how do we collect that data? Can we reasonably use this with generative AI? And one of the things which the ICO recommends is that you should run a data protection impact assessment. And that's a key part of, as you embark on this generative AI journey, is you take your data and you look at it and say, okay, here's a use case we've identified. Here's data we know we've got. can we use it in that way? Is that reasonable for us to use it? Did we collect the data in such a way that the person we collected it from would reasonably expect we would use it with generative AI, for example, as well?
Okay.
So you've got to make sure you stay legal with that.
Sure.
It's all perfectly possible, but it's about taking those right steps, you know.
Yeah. I was going to say, so I suppose we've touched upon it briefly, mistakes that you foresee companies making. Data quality is one, perhaps investing too much and just going all guns blazing. What other mistakes can you foresee happening if there's not a proper strategy in place?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really good question to ask. Probably the simplest, most obvious mistake people will make is they'll go technology first.
Yeah.
And we in the tech business have got a real reputation for doing this stuff. We lead with technology. And if I look at a lot of stuff I've done in the past, you look at things like cloud migration and so on, that was kind of very much a sort of technology kind of problem. We were trying to say, how do we make our data center more efficient when we migrate onto the cloud and we can use these cloud technologies? So it's very technology focused. But that is the thing. If we go and look at this and say, oh right, we're going to go and grab Microsoft's M365 Copilot, it's brilliant technology, and we're going to throw it at the business. That's where you're going to start making mistakes. We're going to go and take ChatGPT. OpenAI have got extensive APIs into their solution. We're going to bolt that into our CRM or something like that. Without understanding what the business case is, the business problem you're trying to solve, that's where you're going to go badly wrong very quickly. So that's probably, I would say, is one of the biggest mistakes people will make, is if you go technology first. You've really got to lead with those, understand the use cases, understand the business problem that you're going to solve.
Sure. And we've spoke briefly before about iterations and the importance of that in Copilot projects. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's about making sure that on your roadmap, you've got some very clear milestones. So to take your point about iteration, that you are iterating through that, so that you are saying, within a month, within 3 months, in fairly short cycles, we would expect to get to this point. We would expect to have proved or disproved our hypothesis that we were working on, and then we move on to the next stage. And look, we've all got loads of experience of this in the tech world, using things like Agile. And I think that will really come into play. It's basically saying, if we look at it, whichever flavor of Agile it is you want to use, but we're going to say, we're going to work in these kind of sprints, and we'd expect we should be about here at the end of that sprint. We'll review the results, we'll go back and then decide how do we move forward from that point. So I think an iterative approach at this stage does look like very much the right way to go about that. And measure your results as you go along.
How can you measure the results, would you say?
Again, making sure that you've properly defined the business use case. So you're basically saying, okay, we would expect, let's just take a contact center example. It's a nice easy one to do. We receive 2,000 emails per month, and it takes us about half an hour to go through each one of those emails, to read it, process it, send back the right response to the customer, log it all in the system. Let's just save the sake of it. It's half an hour per email. Okay, so there's 1,000 hours per month we're saving on, we're spending on that. We think with generative AI we could cut that down. We could make it would be done. We need to have human feedback. We need to review a certain sample of that, the responses going back. So we think those 1,000 hours, we could turn that into 200 hours. So it's an 800 hour saving. So that's where you'd start to get your metrics in. And then as you progress through, when you're doing a pilot, you're looking at, did we get our 80% saving we were looking for? So I think it's at the point you define the use case, you then define what are the metrics we're going to measure that.
Use
what would
data.
Success? Exactly, using data.
Yeah. And what about the hesitation perhaps from either senior leaders or the wider team if they're unsure, because there is a lot of fear, isn't there, of the unknown? So what kind of communication would you advise going about those conversations? Yeah,
for sure. Well, I think, look, any senior leader, if you start talking in terms of the impact on the business, the positive impact on the business, you start talking about the positive impact on the bottom line, cost saving, more efficient use of resources, people resources, other resources, and so on. That's always a good language to talk to senior leaders about, right? So I think firstly, if there is hesitation on their part, then taking them through what a proper plan and roadmap and strategy looks like. Probably the worst thing to do with senior leaders, especially people like CFOs, is to go in and go, we need to go and buy all this new technology, because that never goes down that well.
And it's going to cost you this much.
Exactly, because they'll go, we've been here before, we spent all this money on technology, what value did we get from it? So really, that would be a way to do that. I think your group councils, the legal officers, data privacy officers, you need to make sure they come along with the journey as well, because quite rightly, they're going to be saying we could get ourselves into all sorts of trouble here, because if we start using people's data in a way they weren't expecting us to use it in when they gave us their data, and they signed to say, yes, I can, I understand you're going to use my data. We need to make sure that we've covered that off properly. That in financial services, for example, bias can come into systems. This is a well-known issue within the machine learning field and AI field. If you're making, the classic example that's used, if you're making loan decisions based upon ethnicity, gender, and so on, it's well known that bias has come into those kind of systems. So you've got to make sure you've got a responsible AI, and that's part of what you're going to do when you start up your program within your organization. You're going to go and look for these business use cases. That's a big part of the work stream. But there also needs to be a whole work stream around responsible AI. And responsible AI is about getting the right people, so your data privacy people, your business leaders, technology leaders, and getting a working group with those in a governance framework that says, what are we embarking on here? What are we looking to do? What kind of company do we want to be to our customers? Because just to take your point and extend it slightly further, you're right about leaders being having concerns about it. Customers will as well.
Sure.
Yeah, and all of us as users and customers of companies will say, "Well, how are you using AI?" I took myself off Facebook about 18 months ago because I got fed up with going on Facebook and these blinking short videos just coming up all the time, and it's just like I felt like I was just a guinea pig with an algorithm, and you go in there and you're like, if I click that video, then Mark Zuckerberg knows that I particularly like those videos and I get to see more of them. I don't want to be an algorithm slave, So I think that whole relationship there between companies and their customers is a really important part of this. So, making sure you're thinking about, yes, we could do all this fantastic thing where we could automatically respond to a customer, using a chatbot experience, for example. But we also need to be aware the customer might actually want to speak to a human still.
Yeah, of course.
And maybe we're going to say, well, us as a company, we don't have humans. You don't get to speak to humans. You just speak to chatbots, and we provide you with a better level of service at a better better price because of that. And maybe other companies will say, no, we have a very personal experience, and at any time you can press 1 whilst you're holding, and we'll make sure we connect you up to a human being as well. So I think the inside a company, certainly there will be concerns about using AI and how it's used. Responsible AI is the right way to deal with that, but also remember your customers as well. And probably the one of the simplest ways to deal with this is to be very, very open with the customer. I think we'll increasingly over this year and coming years see AI statements on people's websites that clearly sets out, this is us as a company, this is how we use your data, this is where we use AI algorithms, these are the kind of things we use it for, so that any customer who's interested can go and understand, what are these guys doing with my data? Are they profiling me? How are they going to use it? And so on.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up because it is ever evolving, the space, isn't it? So how do you keep up to date with the latest trends then?
Yeah.
Lots of reading.
It does feel like, to use that wonderful expression, drinking from a fire hose, doesn't it? It's, there's so much great information out there, right? So there's quite a few very good podcasts. Podcasts are always great places to learn lots of new things. So there's fantastic podcasts you can listen to and just keep up to date on. I read stuff every single day of all the latest things that are coming on and so on. And probably one of the biggest challenges is just trying to sort the hype from the reality of things as well.
Because there is a lot of hype. A lot of hype.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's just reading lots of things, listening to lots of things, experimenting with things as well. I think that's one of the great things is that this technology is so accessible. Anybody for free can go onto ChatGPT and have a play around with it. And most people have. which is great. So there's nothing. It's not like there's great barriers into this to do it. So you can get hands-on and play around with all these things.
Yeah. Interestingly, in your decision making, because I have learnt lessons in my business that have been very emotional, and now I try and look at the data. But are there times when you just want to focus on your own intuition and gut feeling, or do you always make decisions based on data, would you say?
Ooh, that's a very, very good question. So I think probably the thing you do with this is you and some of the greatest companies have all been built up around intuition and hunches, haven't they? Yeah. Somebody thinks they know better. This is the Peter Thiel thing, isn't it? What are the secrets? What do you know about that no one else knows about? What was it that Mark Zuckerberg knew about social networks that nobody else knew about at that time? And if you look back at it, it seemed like a pretty dumb idea, really. He was basically saying, I'm going to build a product to help students connect with other students.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, students are pretty good at going and meeting other students, right? There's bars on campuses and all this kind of stuff. So he built that from intuition.
He did, yeah.
And work through that. I think you've got to get the balance right between saying as I said, the hypothesis. Here's our hypothesis. Here's our intuition is that we think in our business we could do this. Yeah, we could improve the business using generative AI in that way. And then we're going to measure that and the outcome from it with the data that backs that up.
Yeah.
And you need both things. And I've seen, people follow intuition and it works and they do incredibly well. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. But that's quite rare. You need the combination of intuition and then going back and measuring that to make sure you're getting the expected results. So so that data plays a really, really, really important part. So that's a really important thing to make sure you get, where you're defining your use cases and you're looking at, okay, so we think if we do this and use generative AI in that way, we're going to get these benefits. What data do we need to collect to make sure we can then measure that? And what's the success criteria we're looking for? So you set all that to get from the outset, and then whatever your breakpoints are, weeks later, months later, as you go through, you can measure that. You're looking at it to see if you're getting the expected outcomes.
Yeah. Okay. So data strategy is a journey, but to be investing in AI methods, you really need to have some kind of data strategy already in place. What phase would you advise to be investing in AI? Because you mentioned data quality before being important. A lot of companies haven't even invested in that yet.
No, and I think that's a really, really important thing to look at very, very early on. Yeah, because you need to say, okay, if we were building a roadmap, so if you take a customer through that whole roadmap workshopping experience. So you get the right stakeholders together in a room on a series of calls, and you go through and say, okay, what do we think AI means to us as a business? And you help them take them through that. And the outcome you're trying to get to is a roadmap that gets them from where they are today to being, generative AI enabled and using it and everything. And one of the most important parts of that is, what data sources have you got? Yeah. What are those data sources? What could they potentially be used for? Where do they fit in with that generative AI strategy? An important part of that is, what is the quality of those data sources? And most people know, where the DQ issues are, and how. And in what way do we need to improve those to be able to use those in generative AI? And it's almost can be a separate work stream. So you would start to look at, okay, we know we're going to use it in our contact center. We know that we need to get our employees all talking to each other better, or finding information, sharing information better. Where is all that information held? And start looking, before you've even looked at the technologies you're going to use to answer the questions, we know we need to use those data sources. So what's our maturity level on those data sources? What's the quality look like? How accessible are they? How scalable are they? There's all of those kind of questions. So I think it's right at the beginning, you need to make sure you've got that in there. And I've heard some people actually saying you could be running, data quality assessment services and workshops before you even start going on your generative AI strategy as well. And there's no reason not to, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. If I was a member of staff and I asked the question, is AI going to replace my job?
Yeah.
Because there is that
big question right now. Yeah.
How would you answer that?
How would I answer that? So will AI replace jobs? Well, AI doesn't replace jobs. AI replaces tasks and can automate tasks. And we'll talk about automation versus augmentation as well. So I think what we'll start to see is that will AI directly take somebody's job? Probably not exactly. What it will start to do is be able to offload people's tasks. So those quite repetitive, boring tasks will start to fall away. Don't think many people are going to complain about that. No. When you start to look at people's job roles. Of course, what then does start to happen is if you can take enough tasks away, then someone's role starts to drop away, or you can consolidate roles. So is it possible that companies could take out, tons of roles across their organizations? Potentially. But I think the reality of how that's going to pan out is going to be very, very different. There's some organizations may well do that. Other organizations, as soon as you start to replace people with AI, then your other staff are going to start, you're going to cause cultural problems in your organization. So you've got to tread very carefully around how you do this. And I think over the next year or two, what we're going to see is a lot of augmentation. So people using, co-pilots like M365, like GitHub Copilot for developers and things, where they'll be augmenting them. So they'll be able to be more productive. They'll be able to get their jobs done much more efficiently. And there's something interesting that Bill Gates was talking about, wasn't he, where he was saying that maybe this will progress us to getting to the 3-day working week. Yeah. And that might be. And I think, if you say to people, look, we're not going to take your job away, you're going to have an extra 2 days off because you can get your work done in 3 days. I don't know many people are going to complain about that.
No, absolutely
And that's
not.
certainly somewhere it could go. So I think AI will increasingly take on more tasks that people do. And then what companies choose to do that is where that gets interesting, because many organizations might then say, well, actually we can now scale the company with the same number of staff. So we can go into more markets, we can go into new countries, we can go into different areas of business we haven't gone into before. We can do more things than we were able to do. So we don't need to increase headcount, but we're not reducing a headcount that's there. I think people just taking headcount out their business, it will. Maybe some organizations will do that. I think we're starting to see a little bit of that with some of the tech companies at the moment are optimizing some of their business processes using AI, and they're reducing some headcount there. I don't know we're going to see that across absolutely everything that comes through. And of course, always remember that famously, Elon Musk went round his Tesla factory with a spray can, taking robots off the production line because they'd over-engineered the production line with the number of robots, and then it became less efficient. And Musk was jumping up and down saying, well, what do you mean we can't turn cars out the rate he wanted at? And they said, well, the robot slows it down. So he said, fine. And they went into the production line, started taking robots out and putting humans back in. So it's not a simple case of saying AI is going to take everybody's jobs. So on. And of course, the thing as well that we know is it will lead to the creation of lots of new jobs we'd never thought of before. Like podcast hosts. 20, 30 years ago, we never knew there would be podcast hosts. Exactly. One of the, you think about how much Joe Rogan gets paid for doing his podcast. 20, 30 years ago, nobody would have known that was even a job title that we had. Content marketers didn't exist, 30, 40 years ago.
So growth mindset you need to adopt rather than scarcity.
Very much
and
so.
Also on the flip side, if say only 3 hours of your day is spent on complex problem solving tasks and now you've got 8 hours, you're accelerating your own personal development as well, because you become your habits, don't you, essentially? And if your habits are just mundane tasks, then it just stilts learning. So that's another positive.
It is, very much so. And you think about the number of people, particularly in working in the IT industry, for example, who work way more than their 40 hours a week. When you hear Gates talking about maybe we get to a 3-day week, actually most people go, do you know what, if you get me to like a 40-hour week, I'll be quite happy with that.
Standard 9-5 would do.
Absolutely.
No, it's a good point. So I want to think about data in your personal life as well, being a pilot and an ultra-marathon runner.
Yeah.
Not bad. So how do you use data in those areas then? And do you use data? I imagine
That's a really good question. So, well, I mean, look, I have on my wrist, I wear a Garmin running watch, 24 hours a day. So there's all sorts of data that comes off that.
Yeah, okay.
And, when I get up in the morning, one of the first things I do is I'll look in the Garmin app and I'll see in there and I can see my resting heart rate overnight. And I can tell you straight away how I'm feeling based on what my overnight resting heart rate was. If I got a cold coming on, you'll see that in the resting heart rate. If I've been out to the pub the night before, it shows up in your resting heart rate. So there's all those kind of things that's in there. Looking at recovery times, all the training that we do in running, you build your training plans around the types of different phases, what type of effort levels you're going to put in. You do a lot of, in marathon training, a big chunk of it is what's called base, where it's quite slow running, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You might be using heart rate data to use that. So yeah, it's really interesting. And looking at, as you build out mileage, particularly when you're doing long ultra runs, you're building up mileage as you go through your plan. So you're tracking all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have a spreadsheet
Do
with
you
all my
really?
training plan in, with all my mileage and everything that goes in there.
And
yeah.
has that improved performance? Would you say?
Very much so.
Massively,
yeah, very much so. And it's funny actually, even just running, just looking at the paces you're running at. I mean, there's great stories from decades ago where some of the top Olympic athletes and things would actually they would nail 400-meter loops on a track every single time they go around at the same pace. I don't know how they do that.
No.
I rely quite heavily on pace off my watch, and it takes quite a lot of effort and work to learn what your paces are without having.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, so we're very lucky these days to have all this kind of data.
Yeah. Do you think you've got an advantage because you're in the data space though? So you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, I guess so. To put all that kind of stuff together, and there's a lot of stuff that crosses over for sure. When I started putting training plans together for myself for running, the fact that I know my way around Excel was very helpful.
It is. Yeah, it's a basic skill that's needed.
Yeah, and the fact that you're gonna set out a plan that you're gonna follow, you're gonna collect metrics that's in there, you're gonna measure those. What did you expect to achieve? What did you actually achieve? And so on.
Yeah. Would you feel lost without your Garmin watch then?
I probably would actually,
Yeah.
but interestingly, when I first started wearing a smartwatch, I used to have all the alerts and everything popping up, and they annoyed the hell out of me. I've actually turned them off. I don't get any alerts popping on my watch because there's nothing more frustrating than the distraction of your watch on your wrist buzzing away.
Yeah.
And I thought about getting an Apple Watch quite a few times, and I've always shied away from having one because I want a fairly simple watch on my wrist.
It tells you to stand when you're standing as well.
Oh, does it?
It's like, I am standing, leave me alone.
Yeah.
You're right, because you do get distracted. And what was mad about when I stopped wearing an Apple Watch, I still felt the buzz on my wrist, even when I wasn't wearing it. So I think the Garmin really just for performance from an athletic point of view is probably the best, I'd say. I don't know, I'm agreeing with you. But I think the Apple Watch can be quite distracting, I agree. Yeah. So what about in piloting then?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, so I'm a private pilot, not a commercial pilot. But but I mean, if you look at how that has all changed over the years, it's just phenomenal. I mean, when I did my private pilot's license about 10 years ago, we were still taught how to use all these old radio beacons for navigation, all this kind of stuff. And everything now is done on your phone or an iPad.
Yeah,
and there's apps we use. It uses the GPS in your phone or iPad, and you navigate across the country using that sort of stuff. And if you look back, you think it was only a year or so back, the 747 stopped flying. When that first flew back in what must be the 1970s, the very early 747s have actually still got a little port in the roof of the cockpit they used to use for astral navigation. So they used to use the stars to navigate from the UK to get to North America. Absolutely, yeah. And there was a dedicated navigator on board, and there was a flight engineer on board.
Right.
Progressively, as the technologies come in, you're now down to a flight crew of 2/3 on those long haul flights, and the 3 is just so you can rotate through pilots and that sort of stuff. And these guys have got so much data at their fingertips.
Unbelievable.
So it's it is amazing. And if you think these services you've got come up, like things like Flight Radar, which are just tracking all the data of all of the information of where all the airlines are. If anyone's interested, you can just go onto one of these websites and see exactly where all the commercial aircraft are at any time.
Really?
And little people have built their own little receivers, which is just a little radio receiver in their houses, and that all then it's like crowdsourced data, just feeds all this data together into the Flight Radar 2.4 or other platforms and that kind of thing. And so it's quite interesting how people build.
Yeah, it is.
And use all that kind of data.
Is. So what distances do you do on your
flying?
flights? Yeah.
Oh, probably just short stuff, maybe a couple of hours at a time at the most. It's just fun.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, no, it's just it's all for good fun. I think flying it's just a wonderful place to be. It's there's nothing quite like the feeling of being you're just a few thousand feet, just looking down at the ground all underneath you. Typically, it's all in nice weather. You don't want to go flying in the rain and that kind of stuff. No. So it's a good hobby. It's a good fun thing to
escapism.
do.
And do you think having these other hobbies outside of work has helped you on your journey, your entrepreneurial journey?
That's a very interesting question. I think they're really important to have all these kind of things, aren't
course.
they? Really, really important. I sometimes read, founder stories, and some of the founders at the very, very leading edge. I just, those guys are just so absorbed in their entire business. They do nothing else other than that one thing. And probably Elon Musk is a classic a case of that, how they just spend their entire lives thinking, eating, breathing their business and that kind of thing. But no, I think you need to get, do we still call it work-life balance? But you need to get that kind of balance there. You need to have these kind of things, whether it's, being a private pilot, whether it's going running, whether it's playing Sunday league football, playing golf, whatever it is that you do, I think you definitely need to have those things in your life for sure, don't you?
It can be consuming, can't it?
Yeah.
And going back to those founders, like how sustainable is it though? In later life, will it still serve them, do you think? Because the stress levels must be through the roof.
Yeah, well, stress levels are all relative, aren't they?
Yeah, of course.
It's you kind of, when you're right in the middle of it, and you run your own business, of course, as well. So it's like you actually, when you enjoy it that much, you don't notice the stress in the same way. I've got to say, I actually find it more stressful working inside big organizations as a permanent employee than I ever did as an entrepreneur. And there's moments in that startup journey where the whole thing is about to come crashing down around you, and you think that is it is game over in the next few weeks or months or whatever, and you get through it. And I don't find any of that really probably as stressful as it is working in big organizations.
Yeah.
So I think it's all quite relative, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right.
But then, when I hear stories of people working, 100+ hour weeks, they get up at, 4 a.m, they only sleep for a few hours a night and this kind of thing. I can't imagine that's healthy.
No, absolutely not. You need your distractions for sure. And then do you have a plan in terms of your business? Like, do you know where you want to be in the next 5 years? Have you thought that far ahead?
Yeah, a great question. I think, look, one of the things I think works best for a business is just to kind of set out as a broad direction of where you want to go, right? Yeah. And certainly the business I've run in the past, what we thought we'd start out to do changes quite quickly. And you've always got to keep your eyes and ears open and listen to, get that feedback from the market. What are customers looking for? And we talk about, how do you build a generative AI roadmap where you come up with a hypothesis about where you think you're going to use it. I think business is very much the same. You come up with a hypothesis, which says people want to use generative AI. They want to know how to do that. They want help on that journey, building roadmaps, then getting these technologies into their businesses and solving these business use cases. That's what it looks like right now, but who knows?
You can deviate.
Exactly. So as you go into it, and I think probably anyone who's thinking of founding a business, you just need enough of an idea to go at.
Sure.
Start going at that, and then listen to your customers and your users, and get that user feedback. Take those cycles in, and then see where you end up. But so long as you're solving problems for other people, you'll always be successful. Yeah,
and those problems will change, so you need to adapt with that change. Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Because a lot just really stick to the plan, don't they? And if they deviate from the plan, some people don't like that. But you do have to kind of roll with it, essentially.
Exactly. But at the same time, you do need to have enough of a plan to be able to make sure, and I would use, certainly in the early days, you're going to want to use like a 90-day plan probably, so okay, to get to that stage where we want to be able to measure something to say, this is what we thought the business would do. These are the initial plans and actions we're going to go and take, and we'll measure that over that time period, but certainly on a 90-day cycle to identify, okay, so we thought this would be what we'd want to set up and do. Is that working? How do we adjust it?
Yeah. Last question before we move on. How do you keep yourself accountable as currently, starting a business by yourself?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, I think, when you found a business and you've got co-founders, you've got each other to do that with. If you're a solo founder, then how do you keep yourself accountable? And this is actually where I borrow stuff out of all the stuff I do around running as well. So, with running, one of the things you can do in there is I can set, artificial pressure. So you enter a race, you have a race that's coming up. That's going to keep you accountable, right? That's, so you've got something coming up in a few months' time. You have to do the training. If you don't do the training, you're going to know when you hit that start line, this is not going to go well. And when you get to the finish line, you know why it didn't go well, because you didn't put the time in. So having those kind of those artificial deadlines that you can force upon yourself is really, really useful. And I think, starting a business up, you need to put yourself at least a 90-day plan in place with objectives, and you need to be able to go through that and measure yourself and look at, I said I was going to do these things. Have I done it? And plan that out. So you're founding a business. What do you got to do? You need a website. You need a name of a company. You need LinkedIn. You need all of these things. Those are all tasks you put in a plan, and then you can go back and measure them. What you got to do is have the discipline to go and force yourself to measure against it, and chastise yourself if you've not done it. But,
artificial pressure, I like that. I've not thought about that before.
And also go make commitments to people. I think this one works really well. Is go to somebody and say, I could come in and run a workshop for you. You maybe in your business you'd say, I will get you these data engineers, for example, these data specialists. You've no idea how you're going to do it at that point, but you've just committed to doing it. Make commitments to people that you've got to follow through
100%. On. You need the third party involvement, don't you? It's like why I'm thinking about getting a personal trainer, because I will go to the gym.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay.
I would say that to anybody who's trying to get into fitness training is, don't just go and sign up to a gym. If you sign up to a gym, sign up to one that's got classes where you've got to be there at a certain time.
That's a big one.
Or you have a personal trainer, so you have to go and 100%. See them. Someone will help you.
Because joining isn't enough.
No.
We're moving on to the quick fire data lightning round.
Right. Blimey.
Wow.
Let's go.
So, number one, what's one common misconception about data that you'd like to debunk?
Ooh, that's a really good question, isn't it? Probably that you've got more data than you think you have, and you don't have the data that you want to have. That's probably the truism around that, right? Is most people, they'll think one of those two things is true. So that's probably the myth there, is you've got more than you think you have, but actually the one thing you really think you should have, and you probably don't have it.
Right, it. Name a book, event, or podcast that you think every data enthusiast should explore.
Blimey, that's quite a good one to ask. I think one of probably the really useful, just general podcasts to listen to. So Andreessen Horowitz have got a podcast called A16Z with Steph Smith. That is a brilliant general podcast for all sorts of different things, advances going on in technology, around data and all that sort of thing. In fact, there is actually an episode on there which is all about how you can use DNA to store data. Ooh. And I won't pretend to understand it, but I would definitely recommend listening to it.
Fab, I'll give that a listen. If you could offer one piece of advice to someone just starting their journey into the world of data, what would that be?
Be curious, keep learning, take every piece of training you possibly can. There's so many free training courses out there, and just be as helpful as you possibly can to other people. Yeah. There we go. That was more than just one piece of advice. But
no, that was great. I like that. Finish this sentence. Data is the key to
our future.
Like it. And number 5, in your opinion, what will be the most significant development in the world of data in the next 5 years?
How it's going to get used with generative AI.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've all got so much data in our organizations. How we bring that to bear with generative AI, the art of the possible of what we can do with that data and how we can use it, how we can interpret it better, all sorts of things. That is just going to be mind-blowing what happens over the next few years.
Massive. Exciting. Well, there we go. Well done. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take a step back and say, Where did we throw money in data and AI? How good is it working? And if it's not working, they need to have the guts to kick it to the curb and start again, or evolve it and iterate.